Yeah, hi friends, I'm here with you with part 2 of the series of videos. In the first part, we were discussing scenario and we highlighted some important points out of scenario. In the second part, we're going to start with questions and answers for your February exam 2021. So friends, here is your question number 1. If you look at the task, behavior safety audits and use of checklists. The question is, what are the benefits of using checklist for critical behaviors during these behavior safety audits? Total marks 10. So you need to come up with minimum 10 points to get required marks. And what I remember is these things are not discussed much in your syllabus. So you need to do a little bit brainstorming, you need to do a little bit research on finding out these benefits. So let's see how we compile these benefits here. Friends, we all know that checklist is one of the major tool to collect some information. Usually we use checklist for equipments and tools to collect information. But here the examiner is asking you how you can get benefit out of these checklists. So for sure, the first benefit is easier and faster method of collecting information. For sure, through a checklist, you can collect required information in a very faster way and easier way. You need to fill out the checklist and you need to move ahead. Identification of trends and patterns of human behavior. To identify the trends and patterns of human behavior, for sure, a checklist is an easier method to find out whether somebody was involved in a safe behavior or unsafe behavior. And then, you can even segregate this area wise, action wise, activity wise, and you can compile information through a checklist to know the immediate and root causes of safe or unsafe behavior. That is for sure, that is one of the purpose why we are collecting information, to collect facts and figures on site. uh, what was the safe or unsafe behavior, what were the causes behind it, what are the underlying causes, what are the root causes. So a checklist can give you a better idea in that area also. Quicker information processing for analysis. Once you collect the information, the analysis part is the second part. You need to make decisions on analysis. So analysis can also be done on the collected information. Since the collected information is a formal shape, is a unique format, it will help you to compile the information, to analyze the information quickly also. Uniqueness of information for better analysis. For sure, checklist is designed in a way that all checklists will have same questionnaires and you will have unique information. How many unsafe acts, how many unsafe conditions, how many unsafe behaviors. So this is a unique information which will help you in making your final decisions. Documentary record, better information management. This is another benefit of checklist. There is a documentary record. Once you fill a checklist, you can document it, you can put it in the file, and any auditor or anybody later on can check these checklists as a recorded document. Okay, and better information management. You can manage the information in a better way in a formal checklist structure. More organized way of collection of information and time management. Okay. Just imagine if you are collecting information and you don't have any document to record that information, you might forget that information. In a checklist way, you are not going to forget anything. You will go step by step. You will collect the required information, and then you can use that information for betterment later on. Okay, so you can save some time also in this. Act as a motivational tool. Okay. Checklist can act as a motivational tool. Any safe behavior, you can use that to highlight in your teams and you can motivate the other team members to follow that safe behavior. Any unsafe behavior also, you can use it as a motivational tool. You can always discourage the unsafe behaviors in front of teams, and by this way you can highlight that these behaviors are not required at site, so they might get motivated towards safe behaviors. Continual improvement and excellence possibilities. Okay guys, if you remember in PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, act, we were discussing that continual improvement is the heart of your health and safety management system. So why we are filling these checklists? Why? To collect information. The main purpose is the continual improvement, the betterment. So a checklist can collect information and it can put you on the path of a continual improvement also. Okay. Segregated attention to every unsafe behavior. You can design your checklist in a way that you can segregate the activities, the areas, the actions in your checklist. For example, PPE non-compliance can be one area. You can see the trends and patterns. Maybe you can see the work procedure compliance, and you can design your questions and answers accordingly. So it will give you a segregated attention to every unsafe behavior. Maybe you will come up with the data that in your production department people are involved in non-compliance of procedures or safe systems of work. So this can be one trend or pattern you can focus on. So checklists have many benefits, guys. You can design your answer in a way that you convince your examiner. Checklist is one of the best way to collect information and to process that information to get required results and to work on the control strategies accordingly. Friends, your question number 2 or task number 2 is a bit tricky, and you need to work a little bit to identify that what are the requirements in Article 10 of recommendations R164, and then you need to compare that with your scenario and you will see where is the breach of those responsibilities by employer. So if we look at the task 2, explaining to the contractors the obligation of employers to workers. Okay, so now for example in the scenario you are explaining to the contractor what are the obligations of employer to the worker, and we all know that while asking a question from the contractor you discovered that he is unaware of the obligations of employers towards contractors. He was not aware of the duty of care concept to be provided from employer to the employee or a worker or a contractor. So in this question, what employer obligations are likely to have been contravened leading to the contractor's accident in this scenario? So we'll be looking at some of the things which employer failed to provide uh, as per the recommendations R164 Article 10, and we'll be seeing those things and then we'll be connecting it to our scenario while answering. You only need to consider those obligations placed upon employers under recommendation 10 of International Labour Organization R164, Occupational Safety and Health Recommendations 1981 R164. So if you remember in the syllabus we studied conventions and recommendations. Conventions were C155, recommendations were R164. So this is what examiner is talking about. He would like you to highlight which areas were not covered by employer or the organization towards the contractor. You should support your answer where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. For sure, in this question, you are going to rely heavily on your scenario, because scenario will only give you information what are the breaches, where employer failed. So let's see how we solve that question. So friends, I have taken this extract from ILO R164 recommendation 10. And these are the requirements as per R164 recommendation 10 from the employers towards the employees or a contractor or people working down there. So if we look at the first A part, to provide and maintain workplaces, machinery and equipment, and use work methods which are as safe as without risk to health as is reasonably practicable. This is one of the requirement as per R164 Article 10. On the second column, I mentioned the breach by employer. How employer failed. Employer failed to provide a safe scaffold due to oil spillage on the scaffold. So it was not risk assessed, it was not checked before use. Inadequate PTW system. Okay, so if you see the requirement, employer must provide safe work methods also. So looking at their PTW system, it is not adequately designed, it is not given prime importance. People are issuing PTW sitting in the office. They are not going to site to check the controls are in place or not. So this is another breach. And poor risk assessment. Okay, looking at the condition of scaffold, it seems that the risk assessment was not done properly, it was not updated, it was not suitable and sufficient for the task due to which the accident happened. So we highlighted three breaches by employer against this clause. So this is how you need to connect it. If you look at the second part B, to give necessary instructions and trainings taking account of the functions and capacities of different categories of work. Again, employer failed to provide specific instructions to the contractor before start of the activity, and it was not assured by the employer that the contractor is well aware of the job requirements. Okay, if you remember in the scenario, it is clearly mentioned that this contractor is experienced contractor, but this is first time they are working on a food manufacturing environment. So they must be given a proper induction, and even the effectiveness of that induction should be checked through evaluation method or something to make sure that they are going to hire a proper contractor for the job to be done in a safe way. So friends, looking at part C of your recommendation 10, again there is a requirement to provide adequate supervision of work practices and of application and use of occupational safety and health measures. It was also breached by employer. There was no supervision provided by employer to supervise the activities of contractor. We all know that in the scenario it is clearly highlighted that after issuance of the permit, they never see a person on site to supervise or monitor the activity of the contractor, which was another breach. If you look at part D, to institute organizational arrangements regarding occupational safety and health and the working environment adapted to the size of the undertaking and the nature of its activity. Organizational arrangements were not adequate. If you remember the scenario, they were inadequate since there was no supervision provided. People issuing PTWs, they are stuffed with the job, so the arrangements are not adequately designed, and that's why the accident happened. Site was not checked before issuance of formal PTW, so there was no site inspector available also. So we all know that in arrangements we have procedures, policies, we have people, we have equipment, we have so many things to cope up with the risk factor, to control the risk factors. But in this situation, the arrangements are not adequate within the organization. So friends, your task number 3 or question number 3 is determining root causes of the accident, and the question is you try to inform supervisor that the root causes of the accident or unsafe behavior are usually management failures. Based on the scenario only, what management failures are likely to have contributed to this accident? So here you are going to highlight all of those management failures which you think contributed to the accident. So let's see. So friends, in answering this part, you can simply start with looking at the scenario. Following were some of the root causes due to which the accident happened. Guys, I am answering these questions in a bullet format, but you are not going to write in this way. As I keep on telling you every time, NEBOSH want a little bit more explanation on the answer. So you will take this one line and you will explain it in 2 to 3 lines the way we are now verbally doing it. So for example, poor management, commitment and leadership. This is one of the root cause. First of all, you need to know what is the root cause and what is the immediate cause. Immediate cause is a direct cause which contribute towards an accident. Okay, for example, in this case of scaffold accident, immediate cause can be maybe slipped from maybe the oil patch, immediate cause which leaded to the accident. The root causes are all those causes which are hidden causes, which are not visible to your situation on the site. So it can be management related, it can be a poor policy design, poor procedure design, poor supervision, poor training, poor induction. All of those things are your root causes. So if we look at the management commitment, in the beginning also we were discussing management commitment is a key towards health and safety. If your management is not committed, then for sure you will not have safety down there. So we all know that management is the one who give you resources, who give you authorities, who set responsibilities of people at different levels with regards to health and safety. So management has a key role. If your management is not interested, if there is no commitment by management, if the management is not visible in your health and safety management system, then for sure you are not going to have health and safety down there. So poor management, commitment and leadership is one of the root cause, I would say, in this accident. Why? Because in many areas we discovered that supervision not provided, poor selection of contractor and all of those things. So it means management is not at all concerned and they are not giving much importance to health and safety. They are not giving priority to health and safety within the organization, which shows that their commitment is very weak towards health and safety. Existence of blame culture is another cause. Okay, if you remember in the scenario, it was clearly defined that one of the manager, he thinks that all the accidents are because of human errors, and they want to put it on people who are involved in accident and they want to close the case. This is called a blame culture. A blame culture is not at all good, where people their morale goes down, because if you are blaming people only and you are not providing good conditions at site, for sure their morale goes down and they are not into health and safety. So blame culture is another root cause for this accident. Poor site supervision and monitoring. We all know that there was no supervision, no monitoring provided for the contractors. If you remember, you recall, in the syllabus it is clearly mentioned how to manage your contractor. So selection of contractor is one part, and then coordination, and then monitoring and supervision of the contractor also. So if you are not providing monitoring and supervision, then people will do whatever they like. They might not follow your rules and regulations at site. So they might get involved in unsafe acts and conditions. So this is one of the cause. Poor risk assessment. The risk assessment in this scenario is not suitable and sufficient. Okay, maybe they would have done risk assessment long back and they never reviewed that risk assessment, or maybe it was done sitting inside the office. So it is not suitable and sufficient risk assessment, guys. This is another root cause for the accident. Poor PTW system implementation. We all know that PTW is a procedure and it is to control the activities of contractor at site. So if it is only done sitting on the table as a paperwork, then for sure it is not going to give you benefits you are looking for. So PTW implementation must be very strong. It should be adequately done. In this case, they are daily issuing 75 PTWs and the staff is not adequate for this job. So they need to have certain people involved in issuance of PTW, some people to go and check the controls in place or not, to verify in PTW. So it's a complete procedure to be followed. Poor induction training to contractors. Induction training was given to the contractor in the scenario, but again, it was like as a formality. It was not done properly. Detailed induction was not given to the contractor. Even the effectiveness of induction was not checked, whether they know what they are going to do or not. So things are only in the papers, only to close the books formalities. Okay. Poor contractor management. Okay, it's a complete topic in your syllabus in which selection of contractor. So in this case, selection of inexperienced contractor for food manufacturing environment. Okay, this contractor is experienced, but again for the food manufacturing environment, they never done any job for such environment. Also, contractor management is a wider subject in which you need to select the right contractor, you need to coordinate and plan your activities. Planning and coordination is also missing in this case, and you need to monitor the contractor and you need to do audits on the contractor also. So it's a poor contractor management. It's a root cause basically, I would say, in this case. Work overload is there also, one of the hidden cause of the accident. People are so busy, they are overloaded with the jobs that they are issuing more than 75 PTWs and they cannot go and check the controls are in place or not, whether the job is done safely or not. So these are some of the root causes, I would say, which relate to the accident. Guys, here is another 10 marks question for you. Task 4, assessing the permit to work system arrangements. And question is based on the scenario only. Comment on the food manufacturing site's application of permit to work system. Total marks 10. So you can highlight here all of those points which you think should have been there for a good permit to work system and they were missing. So let's see. Guys, although there is a PTW system implemented at site, but as per scenario, PTW system implementation is poor at site. We all know. Following are some of the highlighted points to support the comment. So here you are going to bring out all the negative points you find out in the scenario and you will discuss that to support your answer that PTW system is not adequately designed and in action on the site. PTW issuing authority is overloaded with the work as issuing 75 PTWs on daily basis. So we all know that they are stuffed with the jobs. Daily issuing this much of PTWs will for sure compromise the quality of PTW system. So it doesn't mean the quantity. The quality is the main thing. If you are issuing 75 PTWs and you are unable to control the risk at site, then for sure there is no need to issue 75 PTWs. So you need to make sure that you are issuing PTWs for the processes required adequately, going at site, checking the controls, making sure everything is fine, and then verifying those controls while signing those PTWs. Issuance of PTW without visiting the site and looking at the actual controls available. Everything is done sitting in the office. So how you would know, for example, if there is a requirement for a scaffold to be inspected and in the PTW you simply checked, inspected, but you did not check at site, you did not inspect the scaffold at site, for sure it's only a paperwork, you are not going to put actual control. So that's why the system is weak. During executing the job, no supervision provided to maintain the controls. Once the PTW is issued, guys, we all know that there are certain controls to be maintained throughout those 10, 12 hours or 8 hours shift for which the PTW is issued. So somebody has to go there, somebody has to make sure that those controls are in place throughout the job. Otherwise, it's only a paperwork. PTWs are issued from the desk. This is one of the common problem organizations have. And issuing a document from the desk means you did not check the credibility, you did not check the actual controls in place, and you are simply signing a document to close the file. That's it. So it's not a good practice, by the way. No induction provided to executing party. Usually, whenever you are inviting a contractor, before issuance of the permit, you need to provide him with a detailed induction, and this part is covered in your planning and coordinations of the job, uh, in your PTW, in your contractor management topic. So, planning and coordination means you need to tell the contractor these are the hazards at our site, and you need to ask him what are the hazards associated with your activities so that you put some controls to avoid conflicting activities and problems at site. But this was not done in this scenario also. Site and equipment were not checked before issuance of PTW. There is a section in your PTW tools and equipments in which you need to check everything one by one, and you need to make sure that all the tools and equipment used for the job are in good condition, are safe to work with or not. It was not done here also. Poor risk perception of PTW issuer about the task. Okay. In one place at your scenario, it was clearly mentioned that since this is a low risk job, uh, they were just simply issuing a PTW, but their risk perception for the job was very weak. They gave it a low priority, and at the end they faced an accident at site. Although the issuer talked to the contractor about controls, but they were not verified. Okay. It's not only that you tell someone that these controls should be maintained, you need to verify, you need to go and check everything is fine or not at site, and then you can sign the PTW. It's quite a critical document, guys, and there are many disasters around the world because of poor implementation of PTWs. You might have remembered Piper Alpha disaster. That was one of the most discussed disaster with regards to PTW. PTW system was there, but it was a poor implementation of system which led to a mega disaster. In this disaster, out of 227 people, 167 died. So, see if you get some time, go and check this disaster at on the Google's on the websites, and you will see how things went wrong because the system is made by the people and followed by the people. So it doesn't mean that you have the best system in the world and you are protected. You have to follow it properly. You need to take all the controls in place. You need to make sure that your system is going to give you benefit. It's not only paperwork, it's not only a well decorated system, but at the end of the day, if it gives you a safe job done, that is the ultimate requirement by a system. So guys, in part 2 of the series of video, we have covered 4 questions with answers, and I hope that you like the answers. As I kept on telling you, and I'm telling you again and again, don't follow my style of answering here in bullet points. This is just to save time. But when I'm discussing, when I'm explaining you the control, then for sure you are going to write in that format. You are not going to write in bullet points. You are going to write in 2 to 3 lines each point, explaining to the examiner. And this is what is required by NIBOSH examiner to give you some good marks. Otherwise, these bullet points are sometimes they consider this is not explained by the student, so they might give you less marks on that. So make sure that you are explaining it very well in your exams. Hope you like the video and stay tuned. I'll be coming up with the last video in the exam with the rest of 4 questions, and then we'll be continuing some tips and tricks very soon. See you shortly. Thank you very much.